Imagine a mother so devoted, so ambitious, that she would marry her own uncle, poison a rival, and manipulate an entire empire just to see her son crowned as Caesar. Now imagine that same son, once emperor, ordering his own mother's assassination. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Agrippina the Younger and her son Nero, a tale of love twisted into betrayal, ambition corrupted into murder. In ancient Rome, where power was everything and family meant nothing, one woman sacrificed her soul for her child's glory, only to have him destroy her for his own survival. What drives a mother to such extremes? And what transforms a son into his mother's executioner? Today, we journey into the heart of imperial Rome to uncover the tragic truth. Agrippina was born in the year 15 on the Rhine frontier, where her father Germanicus commanded the Roman legions. She was no ordinary child. Her bloodline carried the weight of empires, for she was the great-granddaughter of Augustus, Rome's first emperor. From her earliest days, she breathed the air of power and privilege. Her father was beloved by the people, a military hero whose popularity threatened the reigning Emperor Tiberius. But fate is cruel to those who shine too brightly in Rome. When Agrippina was only 4 years old, her father died under mysterious circumstances in Syria. Whispers of poison filled the palace corridors. Her mother Agrippina the Elder refused to stay silent, openly accusing the emperor's agents of murder. This defiance would cost their family everything, but it also planted seeds in young Agrippina's heart that would grow into an obsession with power and survival. As she grew, Agrippina watched her family torn apart by imperial paranoia. Emperor Tiberius, feeling threatened by her mother's popularity and accusations, moved against them with calculated cruelty. Her mother and 2 older brothers were arrested on fabricated charges of treason. They were exiled, starved, and ultimately died in captivity. Agrippina survived only because of her youth and the protection of her great-grandmother Livia. She learned the most brutal lesson Rome could teach. Power was the only shield against destruction, and sentiment was a luxury that led to the grave. By age 13, she had witnessed her entire family destroyed by the very throne she was born to be near. These childhood horrors forged her into something harder than steel, a woman who would let nothing and no one stand between her children and absolute power. At 14, Agrippina was married to Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, a man of noble birth but terrible reputation. Ancient historians described him as detestable in every aspect of his life, violent, cruel, and corrupt. But the marriage gave Agrippina something precious, a son. On December 15 in the year 37, she gave birth to a boy named Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, who would one day be known to history as Nero. From the moment she held him, Agrippina saw not just her child but her redemption, her revenge, and her pathway back to the power that had been stolen from her family. She would pour every ounce of her ambition, cunning, and ruthlessness into this boy. Some mothers dream of their children's happiness. Agrippina dreamed of her son wearing the purple imperial toga, sitting on the throne of the world. When Agrippina's brother Caligula became emperor in 37, her fortunes briefly rose. She was granted privileges and honors befitting her imperial blood. But Caligula's reign descended into madness and cruelty. When he suspected his sisters of plotting against him, Agrippina was exiled to the Pontian Islands in 39. For 2 years, she lived in harsh isolation, surviving on determination and dreams of return. Her husband died while she was in exile, leaving her a widow. But fortune's wheel turns constantly in Rome. In 41, Caligula was assassinated by his own guards, and her uncle Claudius was proclaimed emperor. Claudius recalled Agrippina from exile and restored her properties. She returned to Rome harder, wiser, and more dangerous than ever. Now she had to secure her son's future, and she would let nothing stop her. Agrippina's next move was audacious beyond measure. The Emperor Claudius was her uncle, and Roman law forbade marriage between uncle and niece. But Agrippina saw in Claudius an opportunity unlike any other. He was aging, politically weak, and easily manipulated. If she could become his wife, her son would be stepson to the emperor himself. She deployed every weapon in her arsenal: seduction, flattery, political maneuvering, and shameless ambition. She convinced senators to petition Claudius to change the law for the good of the state. In 49, just 8 years after her return from exile, the impossible happened. The Senate amended the laws, and Agrippina married her uncle the emperor. She became Augusta, Empress of Rome, the most powerful woman in the known world. But this was merely the foundation. Her real goal lay ahead, making her 12-year-old son the next Caesar. Once empress, Agrippina moved with breathtaking speed and precision. Claudius had a son from his previous marriage, a boy named Britannicus who was the natural heir to the throne. Agrippina needed to supplant him without raising suspicion. First, she arranged for Nero to be adopted by Claudius in 50 AD, making him legally the emperor's son and older than Britannicus. Then she secured for Nero the finest education money could buy, hiring the philosopher Seneca as his tutor to shape him into an ideal prince. She orchestrated his marriage to Claudius's daughter Octavia, binding him closer to imperial power. She placed her allies in key military and administrative positions throughout the empire. Every day, she whispered in Claudius's ear, guiding his decisions, isolating his natural son, elevating her own. The emperor, weakened by age and perhaps by subtle poisons administered over time, became increasingly dependent on his forceful wife. By October of 54, Claudius had served Agrippina's purpose. Nero was now 17, primed and positioned for power. Britannicus remained the legal heir and a threat to her son's future. According to ancient historians, particularly Tacitus and Suetonius, Agrippina acted with cold finality. On the night of October 12, Claudius attended a feast where he consumed a dish of mushrooms, his favorite food. Within hours, he fell violently ill. Some accounts say Agrippina summoned a doctor who, under her instructions, used a poisoned feather to finish what the mushrooms had started, supposedly to help the emperor vomit. By morning, the emperor was dead. Agrippina moved immediately, securing the palace and preventing any announcement until she had positioned the imperial guard. Then, holding Nero's hand, she presented him to the Praetorian Guard as the new emperor. The soldiers, who had been generously bribed in advance, hailed Nero as Caesar. The Senate, faced with armed troops, confirmed his position. At 17, Nero became Emperor of Rome, and Agrippina stood beside him as the power behind the throne. For the first months of Nero's reign, Agrippina was the true ruler of Rome. Coins were minted showing her face alongside her son's, an unprecedented honor. She attended Senate meetings, something no woman had done before. She sat behind a curtain during official audiences, listening and directing policy. She had achieved what no Roman woman had ever achieved, effective control of the empire. But she had made a fatal miscalculation. She had raised her son to believe he was destined for absolute power, yet she refused to let him actually wield it. Nero chafed under her control, resenting her constant interference and manipulation. He began to listen to other advisors, particularly Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus, who encouraged him to assert his independence. The relationship between mother and son began to crack under the weight of their competing ambitions. The breaking point came in 55, just months into Nero's reign. Britannicus, Claudius's natural son, turned 14 and legally came of age. Though he held no official power, his mere existence represented a threat and a reminder of how Nero had claimed the throne. At a palace banquet, Britannicus suddenly collapsed while drinking wine. He died within minutes, convulsing before the assembled guests. Officially, it was declared an epileptic seizure. But everyone knew the truth: Nero had poisoned him. Ancient sources claim Agrippina was horrified, not by the murder itself, but by what it revealed. Her son had acted without her knowledge or permission. For the first time, she felt fear. If he could kill Britannicus independently, what else might he do? She tried to reassert control, threatening to support other claimants to the throne. This was her greatest mistake. She had taught Nero that power required ruthlessness, and now he would apply that lesson to her. Over the next 4 years, the conflict between mother and son escalated into a deadly dance. Nero began openly defying Agrippina, taking a mistress-named act against his mother's wishes, making decisions without consulting her, and excluding her from audiences. Agrippina responded with threats and manipulation, reminding him that she had made him emperor and could unmake him. She would parade through Rome, gathering support among senators who feared or resented the young emperor. Each move she made to control him pushed Nero further toward the unthinkable. His advisors Seneca and Burrus, while urging restraint, also recognized that Agrippina's influence was poisonous to their own power. By 59, Nero had concluded there was only one solution to the problem his mother presented. She had to die. But how do you kill the most famous woman in Rome, your own mother, without destroying yourself? Nero's first murder attempt was elaborate and theatrical, revealing both his cruelty and his cowardice. He invited Agrippina to the festival of Minerva at Baiae, a resort town on the Bay of Naples, in March of 59. He showed her great affection, embracing her warmly, sharing meals, conversing with apparent love and reconciliation. Agrippina, perhaps wanting to believe her son still needed her, accepted these gestures. When the festival ended, Nero offered her his own ship to return home, insisting it would be more comfortable. The ship had been specially designed with a weighted ceiling that would collapse and crush the passengers. But as the ship sailed into the bay, the mechanism failed to work as planned. The ceiling fell but did not kill Agrippina. Instead, the ship began to sink. Agrippina, despite being in her 40s and injured, managed to swim to shore in the darkness, helped by a loyal servant who died in the attempt. Agrippina survived the shipwreck and immediately understood it had been no accident. Bleeding and terrified, she made her way to her villa at Bali. She sent a freedman to inform Nero that she had survived, deliberately not accusing him to buy herself time. But Nero panicked. His carefully planned murder had failed, and now his mother knew he wanted her dead. He summoned Burrus and Seneca in the middle of the night, asking desperately what he should do. The moment of truth had arrived. According to Tacitus, there was a long silence as these men weighed their own survival against basic human decency. Finally, they agreed that Agrippina had to die, but they would not dirty their own hands with direct involvement. Nero sent a group of sailors and soldiers, led by an admiral named Anicetus, to finish what the shipwreck had failed to accomplish. They were to go immediately, kill her, and claim she had committed suicide. In the dark hours before dawn, Agrippina heard the sound of men approaching her villa. She knew immediately what it meant. Her attendants fled, leaving her alone with one servant woman. The soldiers broke down the doors and surrounded her bedchamber. According to the accounts of Tacitus and Cassius Dio, Agrippina faced her killers with the same fierce pride that had carried her through exile, loss, and triumph. She did not beg for mercy or attempt to flee. When the centurion raised his weapon, she pointed to her womb, the womb that had carried Nero, and spoke her final words, "Strike here." The soldiers beat her with clubs and stabbed her repeatedly. Julia Agrippina, great-granddaughter of Augustus, sister of Caligula, wife of Claudius, mother of Nero, died at age 43 in a pool of her own blood, murdered on her son's orders. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her child's power was destroyed by that same power she had fought so hard to give him. Nero's reaction to his mother's death revealed the depth of his psychological torment. Initially, he tried to claim she had committed suicide after her plot against him was discovered. Nobody believed it. He returned to Rome but avoided the Senate for days, haunted by nightmares of his mother's ghost. Ancient sources describe him suffering terrible visions and hearing the sound of trumpets from her tomb. He commissioned poets and philosophers to justify the matricide, claiming Agrippina had plotted to kill him first. Some senators, eager to please the emperor, passed decrees praising his survival from his mother's alleged conspiracy. But the stain never washed away. Even in an age accustomed to political murder, killing one's own mother was seen as an act of unspeakable evil. The matricide marked a turning point in Nero's reign. Having crossed this ultimate boundary, he descended further into paranoia, cruelty, and excess. He would go on to murder his wife Octavia, execute countless senators and nobles, and allegedly set Rome itself ablaze. In the end, both Agrippina and Nero were destroyed by the same hunger for power that had driven them. Agrippina's ruthless ambition achieved its goal. She made her son emperor, but that very success consumed her. Nero's 15-year reign ended in 68, when the Senate finally declared him a public enemy. Multiple legions revolted, and governors across the empire refused to recognize his authority. Abandoned by everyone, even his Praetorian Guard, Nero fled Rome in disguise. On June 9, 68 AD, with soldiers closing in to arrest him, he committed suicide at age 30. He died alone and despised, crying out that he was losing such a great artist, referring to himself. His last dynasty ended with him. The bloodline of Augustus, which Agrippina had fought so viciously to place on the throne, was extinct. Mother and son had climbed to the very peak of earthly power, only to discover that summit was built on bones and blood, including their own. This story, written in the annals of history by Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ambition, love, and power. Agrippina loved her son, but her love was poisoned by ambition. She wanted him to have everything, but what she gave him destroyed them both. Nero was raised to believe he deserved absolute power, and when his mother stood in the way of that power, he chose the throne over the woman who had given it to him. Their tragedy reminds us that power without conscience becomes tyranny, that ambition without limits leads to self-destruction, and that treating people as instruments rather than humans inevitably ends in betrayal. The moral etched in their blood is simple but profound. When we sacrifice our humanity in pursuit of power, we lose everything that makes power worth having. Love twisted by ambition ceases to be love at all. And the throne built on murder and betrayal will never provide peace, only paranoia and eventual destruction. Agrippina and Nero's story is not just ancient history. It is a warning that echoes across centuries, reminding us that the bonds we break in our climb to power become the chains that drag us down into darkness.